someone is dead. The body is still warm, and everyone in the tribe of 30 people knows exactly who did it. There is no police, no courtroom, no judge, no prison, no law written anywhere that tells anyone what happens next. Just 30 people standing around a fire, looking at each other, and a murderer standing among them. What happened next is one of the most psychologically revealing moments in all of human history. Because how a society handles its most extreme violation tells you everything about what that society actually believes about human nature. And what ancient humans did, without any of the institutions we consider essential today, was more sophisticated, more complex, and more brutal than anything you're imagining right now. Before we go into what they did, we need to understand what they didn't have. No prisons, no courts, no professional executioners carrying out sentences handed down by someone else. In a tribe of 30 people sleeping within feet of each other, depending on each other for survival every single day, there was nowhere to put a murderer that wasn't also where everyone else lived. This created a psychological problem that modern societies have almost entirely outsourced away. When someone kills someone you love, and you have to keep living next to them, what does your mind do with that? Ancient humans couldn't hand that question to a judge. They had to answer it themselves, every single time. And the archaeological record, combined with decades of research on modern hunter-gatherer societies, shows exactly how they answered it. The first thing ancient humans did when a murder occurred was not punishment. It was understanding. They asked why. This sounds almost impossibly civilized. But it wasn't compassion that drove it. It was survival logic. In a tribe of 30 people, losing one more person was a serious threat to the group. Every person carried knowledge, skill, and biological value. Executing a murderer without understanding why the killing happened was, in purely practical terms, wasteful anthropologist Christopher Boehm spent decades studying hunter-gatherer conflict resolution and documented this pattern across dozens of modern groups still living close to the original human social structure. The community's first response to serious violence was almost always deliberation. A circle, everyone with a voice. The killer was asked to speak. Witnesses were asked to speak. The circumstances were examined, not to excuse, but to understand. Was it a fight that escalated? Revenge for a previous wrong? Had this person been violent before? Was it something the community had failed to address until it exploded? These questions mattered because the answers determined everything that came next. Here is something the ancient world understood about murder that modern criminal justice still struggles with. Killing someone you know, someone whose face you have seen every day of your life, does something to the human mind that doesn't simply go away. The psychological literature on individuals who have killed in close quarters consistently shows the same pattern. Intrusive memories, disrupted sleep, a fundamental alteration in how a person experiences safety and connection. We call this post-traumatic stress. Ancient humans didn't have that term, but they observed the symptoms and they had responses to them. In many hunter-gatherer societies, documented by anthropologists, a person who had killed, even in self-defense, underwent a period of ritual separation from the community. Not punishment, separation. Days or weeks at the edges of the group, followed by a gradual reintegration through ceremony. This gave the community time to process grief without the constant presence of the person who caused it. It gave the killer time to process what they had done. And the reintegration ceremony was a public act of collective decision, not forgetting, but choosing consciously what came next. Ancient communities arrived at one of three outcomes, and the choice depended almost entirely on one question. Is this person dangerous to us going forward? The first was reintegration. If the killing was understood as a singular event, a moment of collapse unlikely to repeat, the killer could return to full community membership. Not forgiveness in the therapeutic sense. A pragmatic decision. You are more useful to us alive and functional than dead or gone. The second was permanent social death. Complete exclusion. No shared fire. No shared food. No eye contact. No acknowledgement of existence. In a world where survival depended entirely on community membership, being treated as if you did not exist was in many cases a death sentence carried out by social means. The excluded person either left, which in the ancient world usually meant dying alone, or broke down completely under the weight of total social invisibility. The third was execution, and this is where the psychology becomes most complex. Ancient executions were not carried out by a designated individual whose job it was to do the killing. They were carried out by the community collectively. Christopher Boehm documented cases where communities decided a repeat killer needed to be permanently removed, and the method was always communal. Everyone participated. Everyone shared the moral weight. Because the psychological burden of taking a life was understood to be too heavy for any one person to carry alone, the community's process was one thing. The victim's family was another. And ancient human societies understood these were not the same thing. The victim's family held a specific recognized status in the aftermath of a killing. Their grief was not just personal, it was socially acknowledged as a form of debt. The community owed them recognition, care, and in many documented cases, material compensation from the killer's family. This concept, that a killing created an obligation that had to be materially addressed, is one of the oldest documented legal ideas in human history. It appears in the Code of Hammurabi, ancient Sumerian law, early Germanic tribal law. All of them built formal systems on top of what was already an ancient informal practice. And in many documented cases, the victim's family held veto power over the community's decision. If the community voted for reintegration, but the family refused, reintegration was impossible. The family's psychological reality was not a private matter. It was a community problem. The response to the murder was considered incomplete until their grief had been acknowledged. Not resolved, but publicly recognized as a debt the whole community shared. 30 people. One fire, a body still warm on the ground. And a decision that couldn't be handed to anyone else. What ancient humans did in that moment, the deliberation, the questions, the recognition of the killer's psychology, the acknowledgement of the victim's family's grief, the communal sharing of whatever action came next, was not primitive. It was a psychologically sophisticated response to the hardest problem a community can face. Developed across hundreds of thousands of years of painful experience, we built institutions to handle this so individuals wouldn't have to. Courts, prisons, judges, systems, designed to distribute the moral weight so broadly that no single person has to feel it fully. Ancient humans had none of that distance. They felt all of it together. And in feeling all of it collectively, without the option of outsourcing the weight to someone else, they understood something about murder, justice, and what violence does to the human mind that most modern societies are still trying to find their way back to. The 30 people around that fire couldn't afford to get it wrong, so they learned, over thousands of generations, to get it as right as humans possibly can.